favorites and founder of PayPal as well. I think the leaders also have different styles of leading, right? Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, very well known for their thought leadership, for their ability to be able to challenge the status quo and think beyond the norms. We've seen movies like Karate Kid or Dangal where the coach or the master puts the student through a lot of pressure to make sure that they're able to face the competition and win. What are some of your personal stories, Sandeep, from your experiences working with global teams and how that has transpired the thought process and the culture of your company?
Sure. So see, I would want to break it down into slightly different pieces. See, what works for one company may not work for another. What works for a startup may not work for an established company. And while you may be an established company, you may be a startup, you have to look forward and you have to disrupt yourself, as you rightly said. Now, from our perspective, when we look at a disruptive leadership in our industry, I belong to the services industry, and we are a part of a fairly large corporation. We are a part of HARMAN International, $8 billion, which is now an independent-run subsidiary of Samsung, $300 billion. And you have to innovate. While you are small or big, doesn't matter. Otherwise, down the line, whatever market share you have today, you are good at that, you are garnering market share, it will start vanishing. So if you have to have that market share and more, you have to provide the framework for the mass of people that work in your organization to be able to adhere to the competitiveness for today, the competitiveness for tomorrow, right? So from our perspective, disruptive leadership is about bringing that thought leadership, bringing that ability to partition the resources, making sure that the resources you are investing for the capabilities of tomorrow, they are not being taken away and put for the things for today. And unless and until you provide these frameworks and thought processes, unless you are able to stick to it, because it is easier said than done. Everyone talks about strategy, everyone talks about disruption. All that is future. But the future for that is built today. That has to be executed today. And so while we talk about all this, in my mind, that leadership is about bringing that execution discipline, partitioning it in different buckets. We call it 3-box strategy. Somebody else may call it something else. First box is our competitiveness for today, the investments for today. Market share fight for today. You are the best cost in your industry. You are the best capability at that price, and you're garnering market share. Then you're selectively forgetting some things because they are not more relevant as you go along. Then you are investing in the future technologies or business models. Innovation can be technology. Innovation can be business models. A lot of things we talked about here right now. There are technologies available in other countries. Will India move ahead? Will other countries look at India? It's all because of the business model we are implementing. So that, in my mind, is how we as leaders have to partition it, get it down to execution, make it simpler for our teams to understand. Because if we cannot have them understand, there's no way they will adhere to it. So
yeah, I think it is very important to translate the business value through down the chain. So whatever the top management is thinking, is the engineer at the end level is able to understand.
And they all talk the same language. They all understand when you talk about something. They appreciate what you're talking. They align to it, not because you're forcing them to, but they see the value in it. And at the end of the day, it brings value to the stakeholders, whether it's an employee. If you are growing, you are working on latest generation business models, technologies, everyone's career path expands, everyone is happy, and so on. So
thank you. Bala, Microsoft is a company of iconic leaders. Any specific examples that you can share?
Yeah, I know. Microsoft has gone through some funk, right? I mean, if you were to see with the level of position it was about 15, 20 years ago, it's kind of gone through, we've lost the mobile, the whole wave, then the app wave, and then it's now coming back in a very different wave. Technology, and all of us are in the technology field. It's very interesting. Technology field, never follow. I think following is one of the worst strategies in technology, particularly if you're considering yourself as a technology player. Always leapfrog, because the generational change is very quick. 3 years and then 5 years, you can already see the cracks in Apple's strategy with respect to the phone side, right? So things are moving on very quickly. So if you want to be disruptive, you always have to be not follow ahead, but where the puck is going to be, which means you have to leapfrog. And that's one of the very critical thing I look for in the leadership is are your leaders thinking of leapfrogging, or are they thinking of just following and catching up? Because catch up is a really loser's game in this business. Second one is, as a leader, I've kind of seen as well as followed many leaders in this industry. One of the most important traits, in my opinion, is that leaders are people who have strong opinions, but they hold it very weakly. So strong opinion held weakly is the mantra, in my opinion. So it's like you walk with conviction, you make quick decisions, and you walk with conviction, but at any point of time, the data points you in a different direction, be quick to abandon and change, right? Adopt the new frameworks or new method of working, whatever is working out there. So to that extent, I look for one trait is that you always look for confirming your models in your head, like this is how the market is, and you are always looking for data for challenging your model in your head. Walking out of a meeting with only confirmation is a clear sign of danger. You also need some data point which can tell you the limits of the model, because your model is always not right. It's your representation of what's happening in the market. So there are something which is going to hit you, and if you're not open to challenging your own model yourself, and you better fund that also, that initiative, then you are absolutely a sitting duck for somebody else to come and eat your lunch.
So you're saying that competing against yourself is much better than competing against somebody else.
I think you need to look for confirmation as well as challenges in the marketplace.
Just to add a couple of things, we are in the business and consulting business, we like to do frameworks and best practices and I think benchmarks. And I want to use best practices not to follow them, but to find out what's not happening. What are best practices? Usually like 30 people have done something and it has worked, but there is missing something which they may not have thought. So one of the things which I want to look at is take a best practice and see are there any opportunities which others have not done it as yet. That's one way of looking at doing something disruptive. Same with benchmarks. Just because these are benchmarks which have worked until now doesn't mean they'll work in the future. Are there opportunities hiding there which you should be leveraging that? And I think the point which Bala was talking about a little bit there is pursue the truth. Don't be in this false assumption that because your business has worked until now, and it's always nice to be comfortable, but pursue the truth. I think Pari gave a good example of how the services industry, has to look at it. The market cap has fallen by 7%. So make sure you actually take that truth and figure out how you're going to deal with it, rather than trying to be hopeful. Hope is not a strategy, right? So.
Yeah. I'll come to Jagdeesh. Jagdeesh, you're somebody who's in the financial side. How does it play out in your domain, and any specific personal experiences that you have to share?
Yeah, I think what we look forward to is to listen to the voice of the customer, what is unsaid, because many things that the customer would say may not be directly visible. So how do you connect with the customer to hear what is unsaid and then try to act upon it? Because these days when you talk to large multinational banks and the sort of thing, there are too many divisions, too many things happening at across these organizations, but to be able to synthesize, hear what is happening and then act on it, I think is something that helps us in disruptive leadership. And the way we do it is we try to manage these balances between the stakeholders of technology, the customer, what he wants, as well as the associates, and try to manage what we call the dharam sankats between each of them, because they are all at cross purposes. So how do you try to resolve them? One is you have an ultimate balance which never happens, but if you are able to try to resolve these, I think those are the sort of traits that.
Perfect, cool. So maybe just to summarize, I think what we have been talking about is mostly about how do you challenge yourselves. We have a great example that's been quoted multiple times over the years of that of Kodak, where one of the inventors within the Kodak company has already invented the digital camera, but then the company did nothing about it because they were not willing to disrupt their own model, because their investments are a threat. But then somebody came and ate their lunch, and Kodak eventually had to file for bankruptcy, right? So I think questioning ourselves, being able to challenge what we are doing we doing the right thing for the current time, and are we doing the right thing for the future, is what is more important as well. So before I open it up for questions,
Sathish, we were talking earlier about the Kodak movement, and that reminded me of an example of the Patrick Collision. Patrick Collision is the CEO of the company Stripe, and Sharad, I don't think Sharad probably left the room. He was here in India, and Stripe is this phone-based card processing company used by most of the SMBs in the US, and they don't even have presence in India. And he made a visit to India. He doesn't even have presence in India. So when people ask, what are you doing here? He said, I know this is where the disruption is happening. If I have to protect my business, he took a flight, came to India, looked at what's going on in the UPI, Aadhaar game and all that. He's not even in the picture. He's not even in the market. But that thinking of saying, I don't want to live another Kodak moment making him feel like that and make the flight and come there. So.
Exactly, yeah. So a quick one-word answer, disruptive leadership at home. How does it look?
Managing millennials, I think their managers is what I would say, you know. So.
Okay.
Totally echo that. Managing a teenager is like the most disruptive leadership you can have.
So you have the same problem both at work and at home then?
Yeah.
Little better at work.
Interesting challenge.
I would say, yeah, of course. I mean, listening. I think the whole idea is like nobody, at home is a very humbling experience for me. You go outside and people listen to you, and you go home and your kids say you don't know anything, dad, and obviously your spouse says that also. And there's a heavy nod there. So managing that is obviously a very humbling experience.
Great. How about you, Nilesh?
I think yes, dear is the answer. So.
One place where you can't say no, okay. We'll open it up for audience, maybe for a couple of questions. Any questions?
Nobody.
Looks like we have disrupted their lunch.
Lunch.
Yeah.
Lunch is the...
There's somebody out
Hi,
there.
my name is Venkatesh. I work with Oracle. Just want to know from Microsoft, you mentioned about leapfrogging. Think about how do you leapfrog, right? So how do you bring about that culture where, or the thought process within the organization? I'm talking in context of our companies where we are working, and within the organization, if we think about implementing that as a culture, to think about leapfrogging, how do you do that? I mean, what is the process to be followed, and what can we take back from here? Like some tips on that.
I think there are different strategies in different companies. I don't think there's one singular answer that I can give, but a couple of things, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. So that's very important because you need to know where enemies end and partners begin. So I think that number one strategy in terms of leapfrogging is to partner with folks who you probably may not even see right now any partnerships, but around the corner. So one of the things that we do is to actually work with a lot of startups, because ability for Microsoft to own and control innovation is only so limited. We have to realize that we are not the only ones innovating. So working with startups really help us give that surface area to see what's coming around the corner. That's very, very critical. Number two, just keep taking away the chairs under all your leaders and managers all the time. Just challenge them. I think that's very critical. And be open, create a culture of challenging yourself and not just agreeing with yourself. I think I've seen this inertia within organizations to say, okay, I've done X, so next year I'll do X, X or 10% over X kind of thing. And we have to break that inertia. Start from scratch and say, what if I have to do 20X? What does that look like? What if tomorrow I've done X, but I will only do 0.5X? What does that world look like? And if you were to, prepare for that, you challenge yourself in thinking that way and motivate people to actually come up with solutions and then fund those projects. I think funding the projects are very important as well. Then you have created a sense of paranoia in the company, as well as thinking around what's happening that they don't know.
Just to add to Bala, so I'll another example at Kayak, so when we came into business, Expedia had about 100 million searches they were used to do for travel and hotels, stuff like that. And they had 8,000 employees. The goal which Paul set for us was, I want to do 100 million searches with 200 employees. So that was the goal, right? And you can't, if you don't leapfrog some technological barriers, some interaction barriers, partnership barriers, you're not going to get there. And we actually hit pretty close to we were on trend to hit that kind of trend. Our EBITDA at a company was 32%, and only at 22 cents per search margin. So we had 95% gross margins. So those are the things which, when you set high goals, you're forced to think out of the box, and that's how you leapfrog.
So when you spoke about challenging people, it's also important to be open to be challenged by your own people, right? Because they're the ones that are thinking ahead of you, and be open to answering questions that they have for you as well. Any other one more question that we can open?
So, what advice you would give to the guy who invented a digital camera in the codec, and what he should have done better, or how he can convince the people inside this? Because again, internal rate of return or the size of the revenue expected, again, it will be deciding factor. So, what advice you'll give?
So maybe I'll paraphrase the question.
Satish,
You
that
got
was
it.
your example, so you should answer it. I have another answer, but I'll give it after you've given it.
Okay, so I think it is essentially more important to be open to saying, okay, whatever investments I have, I should not be too much worried about it because those investments may go away in the next few years, right? So new ideas are out there to be implemented. So go talk to customers, because the reason that was given in the Kodak example is that nobody wants to look at an image on their phone screen, right? Whereas their primary mission, the core mission of Kodak, was to capture moments for people so that they can carry memories forward, right? But so they somewhere kind of deviated from their core mission. So I think being focused on the core mission and being able to associate your innovations and new ideas to that core mission is going to be very important. That would be the advice that I would give.
We are out of time, Sathish.
Okay, I think we are out of time. There's 0000 blinking on us. So thank you so much for the panel and
Thank
for
you.
the audience for staying over.
Thanks.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello? Yeah, I request you to please remain seated, just 2 more minutes. I'll just take 2 more minutes of your time. Nilesh, could you please present the gifts to all the panelists? And before you guys leave, I just have a few quick announcements, so request your patience for another 2 minutes. After this, we are reconvening at 2 o'clock sharp. We have 3 parallel tracks that are running. One around the theme of ecosystem happening in Aura 1 and 2, that is this room gets divided into 2 parts, so it's 1 and 2. The track 2 is also happening at Aura 3, that is a part behind, which is on the theme of security, and track 3, which is on the first floor, Harmony, is around the theme of workplace. Finally, I remember I took some data from you, and the entire point of that is that your average age that you gave me for a social tech entrepreneur was 32 years old, for a design engineer was 27 years old, and for a technical engineer was 28 years old. But today's most exciting panel perhaps would be at 4:30, right here at this hall, where we have 3 young kids, barely of 18 and 19 years of age, who are these very designations that you gave average ages for. So we have a 19-year-old social tech entrepreneur, a 19-year-old design engineer, and an 18-year-old technical engineer. So I think that is a session you should definitely not miss. So see you here again at the big hall at 4:30. Thank you again for your patience, and thank you all the panelists for your very, very deep and thought-provoking insights. See you next year.